The rejection ceremony was where wolves went to die, not in body, but in spirit, where the bond that made them whole was severed like a limb torn from flesh. And as Sorrel stood on the platform before her entire pack, her fated mate's words still ringing in her ears, she understood that everything she had ever been was ending. I, Stellin of Thornwood, reject you. 7 words. That was all it took to destroy 23 years of hoping, of believing, of surviving. But the cruelest part was not the rejection itself. It was watching him turn to her half-sister Delphine, beautiful, golden, perfect Delphine, and declare her his chosen Luna instead. The pack whispered. They always did. They called Sorrel cursed, said she had been born wrong, marked wrong, fated wrong. Perhaps they were right. Then the doors of the great hall shattered open, and a presence rolled through that silenced every voice, stopped every heart. Alpha Theron of Blackmore, the Cold King, the wolf that rival packs spoke of in hushed warnings. He walked past Stellin without a glance, past Delphine without acknowledgement, and stopped directly before Sorrel. I claim her, he said. Chaos erupted, but Sorrel heard nothing beyond the thundering of her own pulse. He would take her. He would protect her. He would make her his Luna. But he warned her from the very first moment. He would never, ever love her. Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would be. The great hall of Thornwood Pack had never felt so suffocating. Sorrel stood on the raised platform at the center of the room, her hands clasped before her, her spine straight despite the trembling in her bones. She had dressed carefully this morning, her finest gown, her mother's silver comb in her hair. She had believed, foolishly, desperately, that today would be the day Stellin finally claimed her publicly. They were fated mates. The bond had snapped into place on her 18th birthday, a thread of golden warmth connecting her soul to his. 5 years she had waited for him to acknowledge it. 5 years of patience, of quiet devotion, of telling herself that his hesitation meant nothing. She had been so terribly wrong. I, Stellin of Thornwood, reject you, Sorrel of the Ashwood line, as my fated mate. The words hit her like a blade to the chest. Sorrel gasped, her hand flying to her heart as the bond stretched taut, then began to fray. Pain lanced through her, white-hot and blinding. She staggered but did not fall. She would not give them that satisfaction. The hall erupted in whispers. 300 wolves watched her humiliation, their eyes gleaming with everything from pity to satisfaction. Near the front, her stepmother Vesper smiled, a small secret curve of her painted lips. Furthermore, Stellin continued, his voice carrying over the murmurs, I claim Delphine of the Ashwood line as my chosen mate and future Luna of Thornwood. Delphine stepped forward, radiant in white silk, her golden hair cascading down her back like sunlight made solid. She did not look at Sorrel. She did not need to. Her victory was complete. Sorrel's half-sister, her stepmother's true daughter, the girl who had everything Sorrel had ever wanted. And now, the man she had loved since she first understood what love meant. The rejected wolf will leave Thornwood territory by sundown, the pack elder announced, his voice flat with finality. She is no longer under our protection. No longer protected. The words echoed in Sorrel's mind. For a wolf, that was a death sentence. Packless wolves did not survive long. They were hunted, enslaved, or simply left to fade as their wolf spirits withered without the anchor of a pack bond. She would die, slowly, painfully, utterly alone. Sorrel lifted her chin. If this was her end, she would face it with dignity. She would not weep. She would not beg. She would... The doors of the great hall exploded inward. Every voice died. Every head turned. A presence rolled through the shattered doorway like a winter storm. Cold, vast and absolutely merciless. It was not the ordinary dominance of a strong alpha. This was something older, something that resonated in the bones of every wolf present and commanded immediate instinctive submission. Sorrel felt it even through her pain. Her wolf, battered and bleeding from the severed bond, stirred with something that felt almost like recognition. Impossible, someone breathed. The Cold King, another whispered. What is he doing here? Alpha Theron of Blackmore walked into the hall as if he owned it. He was tall, taller than any man present, with hair like winter frost falling past his shoulders in pale silver waves. His features were carved from ice and shadow, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the pale silver of frozen lakes. He was beautiful. Beautiful in the way winter was beautiful, in the way a blade was beautiful, in the way death, sometimes, was beautiful. The wolves of Thornwood pressed back against the walls as he passed. Even Stellin took an involuntary step backward, his face draining of color. Blackmore and Thornwood had been rivals for 3 generations. Theron's pack was larger, stronger, whispered to be touched by old magic that made their alpha something more than wolf. The peace between them was fragile at best, and now the Cold King himself stood in their great hall, uninvited, unannounced. His gaze swept the room, past the cowering nobles, past the frozen elder, past Stellin and his chosen bride, and landed on Sorrel. She felt that look like a physical touch. Cold, assessing, absolutely unreadable. He walked toward the platform. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. Each step echoed in the silence. He stopped directly in front of her. Up close. The cold radiating from him was almost tangible. Sorrel could see her breath misting in the air between them, though it was midsummer. His scent reached her, pine and frost and something darker beneath, something that made her wolf whimper with an emotion she could not name. This is the rejected one? His voice was deep, smooth, utterly devoid of warmth. She is, the elder stammered. But, Alpha Theron, this is a Thornwood matter. The treaty states that Blackmore may claim any wolf Thornwood discards. Theron did not look away from Sorrel. She has been discarded, has she not? Silence. Sorrel stared up at him, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Why was he looking at her like that? What could he possibly want with a rejected wolf? I claim her, Theron said. The hall erupted. You can't. Stellin started forward, then stopped as Theron's gaze cut to him. Something in those frozen silver eyes made the younger Alpha's courage evaporate. I believe I just did. Theron's voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. Unless you wish to contest my claim? Stellin's jaw worked, his hands clenched into fists. For one wild moment, Sorrel thought he might actually challenge the Cold King, might fight for her even now. But then Delphine touched his arm, and his tension bled away. She's yours, Stellin said flatly. Take her. Theron turned back to Sorrel. He extended one pale hand toward her. Come, he said. Not a request, a command. Sorrel looked at that hand. Elegant fingers, skin so pale it was nearly translucent, nails like crescents of ice. She looked at the face above it, and those silver eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. She thought of the alternative. Packless, hunted, dead before the first snow fell. She took his hand. His touch was cold, not merely cool, but genuinely cold, as if his flesh had never known warmth. Sorrel flinched but did not pull away. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. Then his fingers closed around hers, firm and unyielding, and he led her down from the platform, through the parting crowd, past her stepmother's suddenly uncertain expression, past her half-sister's wide eyes, past the mate who had thrown her away like she was nothing. At the threshold, Sorrel looked back. Stellin stood frozen, watching her leave with another alpha's hand wrapped around hers. His expression was unreadable. But Delphine looked afraid. Then the doors closed behind her, and Thornwood was gone. The carriage bearing the Blackmore crest moved swiftly through the forest, leaving Thornwood territory behind. Through the narrow window, Sorrel watched the familiar trees give way to darker woods, older woods, where the shadows seemed to breathe. She sat rigidly on the velvet seat, her hands clasped in her lap, acutely aware of the man sitting across from her. Alpha Theron had not spoken since they left the great hall. He sat in perfect stillness, his pale eyes fixed on some point beyond the window, his presence filling the enclosed space like winter filling an empty room. The cold radiating from him had not diminished. If anything, it had intensified. Sorrel could see her breath now, small clouds of white vapor that dissipated in the air between them. "You're shivering," he said. Sorrel startled at the sound of his voice. "I'm fine, Alpha." "You're lying." He reached into a compartment beside him and withdrew a thick fur cloak, tossing it across the carriage to her. "Wear it. I won't have my new Luna arriving at Blackmore looking half frozen." "Your new Luna!" The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. "Alpha Theron," she said carefully, pulling the cloak around her shoulders. It was warm, impossibly warm, as if it contained summer itself. "I don't understand. Why would you claim me? Does it matter?" "Yes." The word came out stronger than she intended. "It matters to me." For the first time, he looked at her directly. His gaze swept over her face, cataloging her features with the detachment of someone examining merchandise. "You were rejected," he said, "publicly humiliated, cast aside like refuse. Your own pack threw you away, and your fated mate chose your sister over you." He paused. "And yet, you did not weep. You did not beg. You stood there with your chin raised and your spine straight, preparing to walk to your death with dignity." Sorrel said nothing. "I have use for that kind of strength," Theron continued. "Blackmore needs a Luna. I need a mate who will bear my heirs. You need protection, position, a pack to anchor your wolf before she fades entirely." His head tilted slightly. "It's a practical arrangement. Nothing more. Practical." The word should have stung, but somehow it didn't. After years of Stellin's empty promises and tender lies, there was something almost refreshing about Theron's cold honesty. "What are your terms?" she asked. A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, crossed his features before vanishing. "You will be Luna of Blackmore in title and function. You will manage my household, attend official functions at my side, and fulfill the duties expected of an alpha's mate." He paused, and his voice dropped lower. "You will give me children, heirs to continue my line." Sorrel's throat tightened, but she nodded. "And in return?" "In return, you will have my protection, my name, my resources. You will want for nothing material for the rest of your life." It sounded too good to be true. Too simple. There had to be more. "What about the bond?" she asked quietly. "The claiming mark? If I am to be your Luna, there will be no full claiming." The statement hung in the cold air between them, flat and final. Sorrel blinked. "I don't understand. Without a claiming mark, I won't be recognized as your true mate. Your pack will see me as merely a... My pack will see you as whatever I tell them to see." His voice cut through her objection like a blade through silk. "I will mark you enough to satisfy tradition. A surface bond. Nothing deeper." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Theron's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Because I do not form deep bonds," he said. "I do not love. I will not love you. This marriage will be contractual, functional, and utterly devoid of romantic attachment." His eyes met hers, cold and unyielding. "If you cannot accept that, Speak now. I will return you to the border and you can take your chances with the wilderness. Sorrel studied him in the dim light of the carriage. His face revealed nothing, no cruelty, no warmth, no desire to hurt. He was simply stating facts, laying out the terms of their arrangement with the same detachment one might use to negotiate a trade agreement. She thought of Stellin's passionate declarations, his promises of forever, his sweet words that had turned to ash and rejection. She thought of her stepmother's cold smile, of Delphine's triumphant eyes. She thought of dying alone in the forest, her wolf spirit withering to nothing. I accept your terms, Sorrel said. Theron nodded once, as if he had expected nothing less. We arrive at Blackmore within the hour. You will be given chambers, attendants, whatever you require. He turned back to the window, dismissing her. The ceremony will take place in 3 days. After that, you will be my Luna. Sorrel pulled the fur cloak tighter around her shoulders, its warmth a strange contrast to the man who had given it. Cold over cruelty, she thought. I'll choose cold every time. But as the carriage carried her deeper into Blackmore territory, she could not shake the feeling that she was missing something. Some piece of the puzzle that would explain why a powerful alpha would claim a rejected wolf he had never met, why he would offer her everything except the one thing mates were supposed to share. The shadows outside grew longer, and somewhere deep in her chest, in the hollow space where her bond with Stellin had been torn away, something stirred. Something that felt almost like awakening. 3 days had passed since Sorrel's arrival at Blackmore, and the morning of her binding ceremony had finally come. The great keep of Blackmore rose from the mist like a creature from an old nightmare, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. These stone towers clawed at the gray sky, their spires wreathed in perpetual fog. The walls were black granite, veined with silver that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. And everywhere was cold. Sorrel had never felt anything like it. Even wrapped in the enchanted fur cloak, she could feel the chill seeping into her bones as she walked through the corridors toward the formal hall. The past 3 days had been a blur of preparations. Servants had measured her for gowns, shown her the Luna's chambers, and explained the protocol she would need to follow. They were efficient, but distant. Curious about the rejected wolf their alpha had claimed, but unwilling to show warmth until she had proven herself. This morning, everything would change. But first, there was an unexpected complication. Alpha! A steward had approached Theron as they walked toward the ceremony chamber. There is a matter requiring your attention. Visitors arrived an hour ago from Thornwood. They claim it is urgent. Theron went very still. Who? Lady Vespera, the steward said, and Lord Stellin's representative. They are waiting in the formal hall. Something cold and dangerous flickered across Theron's face before his expression smoothed to blankness. How interesting, he murmured. My enemies have followed me home. Sorrel's stomach dropped. Her stepmother was here. Already. Why? To sabotage the arrangement? To reveal whatever she thought Sorrel was hiding? Come. Theron's hand closed around her elbow, cold, firm, inescapable. You will stand beside me for this. Alpha, You are to be my Luna. You will begin as you intend to continue. His voice allowed no argument. With me, at my side, facing whatever comes. They walked through the keep together, Sorrel's heart pounding against her ribs. The corridors were vast and shadowed, lit by torches that burned with blue-white flames instead of orange. Tapestries lined the walls, depicting battles and wolves, and scenes she did not recognize, and everywhere, that unnatural cold. The formal hall doors opened before them. Lady Vespera stood near the center of the room, elegant in dove-gray silk, her silver-streaked hair coiled elaborately atop her head. Beside her was a young man in Thornwood colors, Stellin's cousin, Sorrel realized, a diplomatic envoy. Her stepmother's eyes found her immediately, and something ugly flashed through them before being hidden behind a gracious smile. "Alpha Theron," Vesper said, dipping into a curtsy. "How generous of you to receive us so quickly. I was not aware our packs were on receiving terms." Theron released Sorrel's arm and moved to the raised seat at the head of the hall. Not quite a throne, but close enough. "You may speak. Briefly." Vespera's smile remained fixed. "We come with concerns, Alpha. About the wolf you have claimed. My future Luna is not your concern. With respect, she is." Vespera's voice hardened slightly. "That girl was rejected for good reason. There are things about her, her bloodline, her nature, that you are not aware of. Things that could bring danger to your pack if left unaddressed." Sorrel felt the blood drain from her face. She doesn't know, Sorrel thought desperately. She suspects, but she doesn't know. She can't know. But even as she thought it, she saw the calculation in her stepmother's eyes, the willingness to say anything, true or not, to destroy what Sorrel had found. "Is that so?" Theron's voice betrayed nothing. "And what exactly is this nature you speak of?" "She is cursed." Vespera's voice rang through the hall. "Born under ill omens, marked from birth. Even her own mother knew what she was and tried to hide it." "You dare speak of my mother?" The words tore from Sorrel before she could stop them. "You who drove her to her grave with your lies and manipulations." "Silence." Theron's command cracked through the air. Both women went still. He rose from his seat and descended the steps with deliberate slowness. He walked past Vespera without acknowledgement, coming to stand directly before Sorrel. "Is there something you wish to tell me?" he asked quietly. "Something about your birth or nature that I should know before we are bound." Sorrel's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She could feel her stepmother's triumphant gaze boring into her back. "Tell him," something inside her urged. "Tell him now, before she twists it into something worse." But the words would not come. How could she explain what she barely understood herself? How could she reveal a secret she had spent her entire life hiding? "I am not cursed," she said, and it was not entirely a lie. "I am not dangerous. I am simply a wolf who was rejected by a mate who did not want her." Theron studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned away. "Lady Vespera," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I did not invite you to my territory. I did not request your counsel. And I certainly did not ask for your assessment of my future Luna." Vespera's smile faltered. "The wolf I claimed is under my protection now. Her past belongs to Thornwood. Her future belongs to Blackmore." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something soft and infinitely dangerous. "If you speak ill of her in my presence again, I will consider it an act of war." The color drained from Vespera's face. "You have until sundown to leave my territory," Theron continued. "I suggest you do not test whether I mean what I say." He turned his back on her, a deliberate insult, and extended his hand to Sorrel. "Come," he said. "We have a ceremony to attend." Sorrel took his hand, that same impossible coldness seeping through her skin. She let him lead her past her stepmother's frozen expression, past the Thornwood envoy's shocked eyes, toward a door at the far end of the hall. But just before they crossed the threshold, Vespera's voice reached her, low, venomous, meant for her ears alone. "When he discovers what you truly are, little shadow, even his protection won't save you. The darkness in your blood will consume everything you touch, including your precious cold king." The door closed behind them. Sorrel's hand was shaking, and deep in the hollow of her chest, where something had stirred in the carriage, she felt it move again, unfurling like a creature waking from a long sleep. Something dark, something ancient, something that frightened her far more than her stepmother's threats ever could. The contract ceremony was held in the heart of Blackmore Keep, in a circular chamber carved from the same black granite as the walls. Silver runes lined the floor in concentric patterns, pulsing faintly with old magic. Sorrel stood at the center, dressed in a gown of midnight blue that the servants had provided. It was finer than anything she had ever worn, silk that moved like water, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light of the blue-white torches. She felt like an imposter. The Blackmore pack had gathered to witness the binding. They filled the curved benches that rose in tiers around the chamber, hundreds of wolves watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility. She was an outsider, a rejected wolf from a rival pack. No matter what title Theron gave her, she would have to earn their respect, if she lived long enough to do so. Theron entered through a door opposite her, and the chamber fell silent. He wore black, as always, formal attire that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lethal grace of his movements. His pale hair was bound back from his face, revealing the sharp planes of his features. He looked like a king. He looked like a weapon. He looked at her, and Sorrel felt that gaze like ice against her skin. The elder who would perform the ceremony stepped forward, a weathered woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. "We gather to witness the binding of Alpha Theron of Blackmore to Sorrel of the Ashwood line," she intoned. "Let any who would contest this union speak now, or hold their peace for all time." Silence stretched through the chamber. Then a voice rang out from the upper tiers. "I contest." Sorrel's heart stopped. A man rose from the benches, tall, broad-shouldered, with the bearing of a warrior. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and his eyes burned with barely contained fury. "Commander Caspian," the elder said, her voice neutral. "State your objection." "My objection is simple." Caspian descended the steps, his boots ringing against the stone. "This woman is unknown to us, rejected by her own pack, cast aside by her fated mate." He stopped at the edge of the rune circle, his gaze fixed on Sorrel with undisguised contempt. "And now our Alpha would make her Luna? Would place a stranger above wolves who have served Blackmore for generations?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sorrel saw heads nodding, heard whispers of agreement. "Furthermore," Caspian continued, his voice rising, "there are rumors about this woman, about her bloodline, about what she truly is." He turned to address the crowd. "Should we not know what creature we are welcoming into our midst before we bind her to our Alpha?" The murmurs grew louder. Sorrel could feel the tide of suspicion rising around her, threatening to drown her before she even had a chance to prove herself. She opened her mouth to speak, though she had no idea what she would say, but Theron moved first. He stepped forward, placing himself between Sorrel and Caspian. The temperature in the chamber plummeted. "Commander." Theron's voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You have served Blackmore well. Your father served my father. Your grandfather served my grandfather. 3 generations of loyalty." Caspian lifted his chin. "Which is why I speak, Alpha. Out of loyalty." "Loyalty." Theron repeated the word as if tasting it. "And yet, when I claimed this woman, when I declared my intention before the entirety of Thornwood, you said nothing. When I brought her through our gates, you said nothing. When I announced the ceremony, you said nothing." He paused. "But now, with an audience watching, you choose to speak." The commander's face reddened. "Alpha." "That is not loyalty, Caspian. That is theater." Theron's voice cut through his objection like a blade through silk. "And I do not appreciate theater." The silence that followed was absolute. "This woman," Theron continued, turning to face the assembled pack, "was rejected through no fault of her own. Her mate chose another. Her pack abandoned her. She stood on the edge of death, and she did not flinch. He turned back to Sorrel, and something in his expression shifted. Still cold, still guarded, but with a flicker of something almost like respect. I chose her because I saw strength where others saw shame. I chose her because Blackmore needs a Luna who has survived the worst and emerged standing. His voice rang through the chamber. I chose her because she is worthy of the title I offer. Sorrel's breath caught in her throat. If any wolf in this chamber believes they know better than their alpha, Theron said, his gaze sweeping the crowd, they are welcome to challenge me. Here. Now. No one moved. Caspian's jaw worked, but he remained silent. After a long moment, he inclined his head stiffly and retreated to his seat. Theron extended his hand to Sorrel. Shall we proceed? She took his hand, that familiar cold, that impossible chill, and let him draw her forward to the center of the rune circle. The elder cleared her throat and resumed the ceremony. The binding was simple. Words spoken, blood exchanged, a single drop from each of them, mingling on a silver blade, and the runes beneath their feet flared brilliant white before fading back to their gentle pulse. It is done, the elder announced. Sorrel of the Ashwood line is now Luna of Blackmore. A cheer rose from some portion of the crowd. Not all, but enough. Sorrel saw faces that remained skeptical, hostile, and uncertain. But she also saw faces that were curious, watching, waiting to see what she would do. Theron's hand tightened around hers just for a moment before releasing. Come, he said quietly. There is a feast to attend, and you have a pack to win. He led her from the chamber, and Sorrel walked beside him with her spine straight and her chin raised, just as she had in Thornwood when everything was falling apart. But this time, she was not alone. And for the first time since her rejection, she allowed herself to feel something that might have been hope. 3 weeks passed. Sorrel learned the rhythms of Blackmore Keep, the endless corridors, the servants who moved through shadows, the strange blue-white flames that never seemed to give warmth. She learned the names of council members, the protocols of Luna duties, the delicate politics of a pack that did not yet trust her. And every night, without fail, Theron came to her chambers. It had begun as duty. The production of heirs, he had called it, a necessary function of their arrangement. He would arrive after moonrise, cloaked in that perpetual cold, and they would fulfill their obligations in darkness. But somewhere along the way, something had shifted. Tonight, Sorrel sat before the fire, a fire that burned with ordinary orange flames, enchanted to combat the unnatural chill of the keep when the knock came. Enter, she called. Theron stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He looked tired tonight, she noticed. There were shadows beneath his pale eyes, a tension in the set of his shoulders. The Thornwood delegation sent another message. He said without preamble, Your stepmother is petitioning for an audience with the High Council. She claims you were taken against your will. Sorrel felt ice that had nothing to do with Theron slide down her spine. That's a lie. I know. He moved to the window, staring out at the mist-shrouded grounds. I've sent documentation of our binding, your verbal consent before witnesses. The letter of pack law that grants me the right to claim any wolf Thornwood rejects. He paused. It should be enough. Should be. Politics are rarely certain. He turned to face her, and the firelight painted strange shadows across his features. She wants you back. Or more accurately, she wants to destroy whatever alliance you might build here. Why? The question burst from Sorrel before she could stop it. I was nothing to her. Nothing to any of them. Why pursue me now? Theron studied her for a long moment. You truly don't know? Know what? He crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her, closer than he usually positioned himself, close enough that she could see the individual shards of silver in his irises. Your mother, he said quietly. What do you know of her bloodline? Sorrel's hands tightened in her lap. She died when I was young. My father remarried quickly. Vesper made certain I learned nothing of my mother's history. Your mother was Ashwood by marriage, but by birth, she was something else entirely. Theron's voice was careful, measured. She came from a line that predates the pack structure as we know it. Wolves that were touched by the old magic, the kind that existed before boundaries and territories, and alphas who ruled by strength alone. Sorrel's heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying that your stepmother has spent 23 years suppressing whatever you inherited from your mother, and I suspect she is terrified of what might happen if you ever discovered the truth. The hollow space in Sorrel's chest, the place where something had stirred in the carriage, where something had moved again when Vesper threatened her, seemed to pulse. You knew, she breathed. When you claimed me, you knew what I might be. I suspected. His gaze did not waver. The old bloodlines are rare. Most believe they died out generations ago. But I have seen enough to know that some things do not disappear simply because we wish them gone. Sorrel rose from her chair, suddenly unable to sit still. She paced toward the fire, feeling its heat against her face. What am I? She asked. What did I inherit? I don't know. For the first time, Theron sounded almost uncertain. But I intend to find out. With your permission. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, still cold, still guarded, but with something flickering beneath the surface. Why? She asked. Why does it matter to you? He rose and crossed to stand before her. This close, the cold radiating from him was almost painful, and yet she did not step back. Because you are my Luna, he said. Because whatever power sleeps in your blood could be an asset to Blackmore. He paused, and his voice dropped lower. And because I find myself curious about you, more than I expected to be. Sorrel's breath caught. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't move, his cold fingers brushed against her cheek, a touch so light it barely registered, yet somehow more intimate than anything they had shared in darkness. You are not what I anticipated, he murmured. When I claimed a rejected wolf from Thornwood, I expected someone broken. Someone grateful enough to ask no questions and demand nothing. I am grateful, Sorrel whispered. No. A ghost of something, not quite a smile but close, crossed his features. You are not. You are guarded, wary, and utterly determined to prove yourself. But grateful? He shook his head. You challenge me in ways I did not foresee. And I find that I do not mind. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, leaving a trail of cold fire. Theron, she said, and it was the first time she had used his name without the title. His eyes darkened. Something shifted in the air between them, heavy and electric. Then he stepped back, and the moment shattered. Rest, he said, his voice once again controlled. Tomorrow we meet with the council about the Thornwood situation. You will need your strength. He turned and walked toward the door. Theron. The name fell from her lips before she could stop it. He paused, his hand on the latch. Thank you, she said, for telling me the truth, for not hiding what you suspect. He was silent for a long moment. Then, without turning, he said, I told you I would not lie to you. I intend to keep that promise. The door closed behind him. Sorrel stood alone before the fire, her cheek still burning with the memory of his cold touch. She was falling. She knew it was dangerous. She knew his terms. No love, no deep bonds, nothing beyond the contractual. But her heart did not seem to care about terms. And somewhere in the hollow of her chest, the ancient thing that slept in her blood stirred again, reaching toward the cold that surrounded Theron like a shadow. Reaching, she realized with dawning horror, as if it recognized something familiar. 2 months had passed since the binding ceremony, and the weeks had blurred together like watercolors bleeding into each other, vivid moments surrounded by soft, undefined time. Sorrel threw herself into her Luna duties. She mediated disputes among pack members, organized the keep's domestic affairs, and slowly, painstakingly, began to earn grudging respect from those who had doubted her. Commander Caspian remained cold, but his open hostility had faded to watchful neutrality. It was not acceptance, but it was progress. And every evening Theron came to her chambers. What had begun as obligation evolved into something neither of them named. He would arrive as the sun set, and instead of proceeding immediately to bed, they would talk. About the pack, about politics, about the tensions with Thornwood and the old alliances that might be leveraged against them. She learned that he had become alpha at 17 when his father fell to an assassin's blade. She learned that his mother had died in childbirth, leaving him alone with a crown he had never wanted. He learned that she had spent her childhood hiding, from her stepmother's cruelty, from her half-sister's perfect shadow, from the strange feelings that sometimes surged through her when her emotions ran high. They did not speak of love. The word hung between them like a forbidden thing, acknowledged only by its absence. But Sorrel felt it growing anyway. It was in the way he listened when she spoke, his pale eyes focused entirely on her face. In the way he remembered small details, her preference for honeyed tea, her dislike of certain ceremonial traditions, the way she rubbed her wrist when she was nervous. It was in the way he touched her now, when they came together in darkness. No longer mere obligation. There was tenderness in his cold hands, gentleness in the way he held her close afterward, his breath stirring her hair. He never stayed until morning. He always left before dawn, slipping away while she pretended to sleep. But each night he stayed a little longer. It was on such a night, 2 months after her binding, that everything changed. They lay tangled together in the aftermath. His arm draped across her waist, his forehead pressed against her shoulder. The cold of his skin had become familiar, almost comforting. She had learned to find warmth in his presence even as his body radiated winter. "I have something to tell you," she said quietly. Theron stirred, lifting his head. In the darkness, she could just make out the pale gleam of his eyes. "What is it?" Sorrel took a breath. She had known for a week now, confirmed by the keep's healer. She had been waiting for the right moment, though she wasn't sure such a moment existed. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Then Theron's hand moved to her stomach, his palm pressing flat against her skin. She felt the cold seep into her, but beneath it, something else. A tremor in his fingers that she had never felt before. "You're certain?" "Yes. The healer confirmed it 3 days ago." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something she had never expected. He laughed. It was soft, barely more than an exhale, but it was unmistakably laughter, genuine and wondering. "An heir," he murmured. "A child." "Yes." Sorrel's voice was uncertain. "Is that acceptable? Acceptable?" He rose onto one elbow, looking down at her. Even in the darkness, she could see the wonder in his expression. "Sorrel, this is everything. This is what we needed. What Blackmore needed?" He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, cold, tender, reverent. "You've given me an heir," he said against her skin. "You've secured the future of my line." Sorrel closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the moment. She should be happy. This was what he wanted. This was what their arrangement demanded. But a small, treacherous part of her had hoped for something more. "I should let you rest," Theron said, beginning to rise. "Stay." The word escaped before she could stop it. Sorrel felt heat rush to her cheeks. "I mean, you don't have to." But you could, if you wanted. Theron went still. Stay until morning, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. Just this once. The silence stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then, slowly, Theron lowered himself back down beside her. His arm curled around her waist, pulling her against his chest. His chin came to rest atop her head. Just this once, he agreed. Sorrel closed her eyes, surrounded by cold that somehow felt like home. She didn't mean to say it. The words simply rose from somewhere deep inside her, slipping past her defenses before she could stop them. I love you. Theron's body went rigid. The cold intensified. Not gradually, but all at once, as if winter itself had descended into the room. Frost began to creep across the bedsheets, crackling and spreading from where his skin touched the fabric. What did you say? His voice was strangled, horrified. Sorrel's heart clenched with sudden terror. Theron, what? He wrenched himself away from her, stumbling from the bed. In the moonlight streaming through the window, she could see him clearly now, and what she saw made her blood freeze. Frost was spreading across his chest, not on his skin, but beneath it. Crystalline patterns blooming from his heart outward, visible through flesh that had turned nearly translucent. No. The word tore from him like a curse. No, no, no. This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to. He collapsed to his knees. Theron! Sorrel scrambled from the bed, falling beside him. His skin was so cold it burned her hands, but she didn't let go. What's happening? Tell me what's happening. His eyes found hers, and she saw something she had never seen in them before. Fear. There's a curse, he gasped. On my bloodline. Ancient. Unbreakable. Frost crept up his neck, threading toward his jaw. The alphas of Blackmore cannot love. If we ever truly love someone... What? Sorrel demanded, tears streaming down her face. What happens? We freeze. His voice was fading, his eyes growing distant. From the inside out, our hearts turned to ice. No. She shook him, desperate. No, there has to be a way. There has to be... I tried so hard not to love you. His hand rose, trembling, to cup her face. His touch was like holding death itself. Cold beyond cold, cold beyond survival. I thought if I kept my distance, if I never let you in... A broken laugh escaped him. But you were so brave, so fierce, so beautiful in ways I didn't know I needed. Theron, please. I love you. The words came out as barely a whisper. I think I loved you from the moment you took my hand in that hall. And now... His eyes rolled back. He collapsed in her arms. Help! Sorrel screamed, her voice tearing through the keep. Someone help me! The alpha is dying. But even as she screamed, she could feel the cold spreading through him, feel his heart slowing, his breath fading. The man she loved was freezing to death in her arms. And it was all because he had loved her back. The healers came. They brought warming stones and enchanted blankets, and herbs meant to kindle internal fire. None of it worked. Theron lay in the great bed, his skin translucent, and the frost beneath it spreading hour by hour. His breath came in shallow gasps. Each exhale a plume of white mist. His heart beat once, then waited an eternity before beating again. He was dying. Sorrel had not left his side. She sat beside him, holding his frozen hand, watching the ice consume the man she loved. The curse. The impossible, ancient curse that had haunted his bloodline for generations. Every alpha of Blackmore who dared to love had died the same way, their hearts turning to ice, their bodies becoming monuments to forbidden emotion. There has to be a way, she said, her voice hoarse from hours of pleading with healers, with the council, with anyone who would listen. There has to be something. Commander Caspian stood near the door, his expression grim. Whatever hostility he had harbored towards Sorrel had been set aside in the face of his alpha's impending death. The curse was placed by an ancient witch, he said quietly. Generations ago. Our archives speak of it, but there is no record of a cure. Then we find one. Sorrel's grip tightened on Theron's hand. We find the witch who cast it, or her descendants, or someone who understands the old magic. We do not simply let him die. Luna, Caspian hesitated. There is someone, an oracle who lives in the Hollowlands, at the edge of our territory. She is said to know things that others have forgotten. But the journey is dangerous, and there is no guarantee. Take me to her. You are with child. The Alpha would never... The Alpha is unconscious. Sorrel rose, releasing Theron's hand with aching reluctance. And I am Luna of Blackmore. And I will not sit here and watch my mate die when there is even the slightest chance of saving him. Caspian studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I will prepare the horses. The Hollowlands lived up to their name, a desolate stretch of forest where the trees grew twisted and the mist clung to the ground like a living thing. Even in summer, the air was cold here. Sorrel rode in silence, Caspian beside her, 2 other guards trailing behind. Her hand rested on her stomach, where a new life was growing, a life that might never know its father if she failed. The oracle's dwelling was a cave carved into the side of a hill, its entrance marked by runes that glowed faintly in the perpetual twilight. An old woman waited at the threshold, her eyes milky with blindness but somehow seeing everything. The Luna of Blackmore, the oracle said before Sorrel could speak. Come to save her frozen king. Sorrel dismounted. You know why I'm here. I know many things. The oracle smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. I know what sleeps in your blood. I know what curse grips your mate. And I know that one cannot be broken without the other being awakened. Sorrel's heart clenched. What do you mean? The oracle beckoned her forward. Come inside, child of the old blood. Let me show you what your stepmother tried so desperately to hide. The cave was larger than it appeared from outside, its walls covered in paintings that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. Sorrel followed the oracle deeper, leaving Caspian and the guards at the entrance. The curse on Blackmore, the oracle said, her voice echoing strangely, was placed by a witch of considerable power. A witch who sought to punish the Alphas for a betrayal so profound that her vengeance would span generations. What betrayal? The first Alpha of Blackmore loved a witch. Loved her truly, completely. But when his council demanded he take a wolf mate, he abandoned her. Left her to die in the cold, the very cold that now consumes your mate. Sorrel's breath caught. She cursed him for abandoning her. She cursed his entire line. Every Alpha would carry winter in their bones, and if they ever dared to love as she had been loved, and as she had been betrayed, their hearts would freeze. How do I break it? The oracle turned to face her, those blind eyes somehow piercing. The curse was born of fire, betrayed by ice. It can only be broken by fire willingly embracing ice. She reached out and touched Sorrel's chest, directly over her heart. There is fire in you, child. Old fire, the kind that burned before the first winter, the kind that your stepmother bound within you because she feared what you would become. Sorrel's pulse thundered. My mother's bloodline. Your mother was the last daughter of the flame-touched, wolves who carried elemental fire in their souls, who could warm the coldest hearts, melt the deepest ice. The oracle's hand pressed harder against Sorrel's chest. That power lives in you, bound, sleeping, waiting for you to claim it. How? Sorrel's voice cracked. How do I claim it? You must go back to where you began, to the place where your fire was first bound. The oracle's smile was ancient, knowing. You must face the one who bound you, and you must burn away the chains she placed upon your soul. Sorrel's mind raced. Thornwood. Vespera. The woman who had spent 23 years suppressing her, hiding her, trying to destroy her. My stepmother, she breathed. She bound my power. With magic stolen from your dying mother's body. The oracle's voice was soft, terrible. Your mother did not die of sickness, child. She died because Vespera drained her life force to fuel the binding that would keep your fire contained. The world tilted beneath Sorrel's feet. No, she whispered. No, that can't. Go home, the oracle said. Face your enemy, claim your fire, and then return to your frozen king and show him what it means to be loved by someone who will burn the world to save him. Sorrel rode through the night. She left Caspian with orders to watch over Theron, to keep him alive by whatever means necessary until she returned. The commander had argued, had insisted on accompanying her, but Sorrel refused. This was her battle. Her past. Her fire to claim. Thornwood territory looked different in the darkness. Smaller somehow. Less imposing. The great hall where she had been rejected rose before her, torches blazing in the windows. She did not stop at the gates. Wolves tried to intercept her, but she rode past them, something wild rising in her blood. The thing that had stirred in the carriage, that had moved when Vespera threatened her. It was fully awake now, straining against bonds she could suddenly feel. Chains of magic wrapped around her soul. Chains that had been there for so long she had forgotten they existed. Until now. She found Vespera in the private chambers of the Luna, the chambers that had once belonged to Sorrel's mother. Her stepmother was alone, seated before a mirror, brushing her silver-streaked hair. I wondered when you would come, Vespera said without turning. I heard about the Cold King. How tragic. How inevitable. You knew. Sorrel's voice was steady despite the fury burning through her veins. You knew about the curse. You knew what would happen if he loved me. I suspected. Vespera set down the brush and turned to face her stepdaughter. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Why do you think I tried so hard to keep you from going with him? It wasn't concern for your safety. It was concern for what would happen when your fire finally woke. My fire. Sorrel stepped closer. The fire you bound, in with magic stolen from my mother as she lay dying. For the first time, something flickered across Vespera's face. Not guilt, something closer to satisfaction. Your mother was weak, she said. She could have been powerful. The flame touched were powerful. But she chose love over ambition, chose your father over her own legacy. Her lip curled. She deserved what she got. She trusted you. And that was her mistake. Vespera rose, her silk gown whispering against the floor. Just as it would be your mistake to think you can come into my territory and threaten me. She raised her hand, and Sorrel felt the chains around her soul tighten, felt her breath catch, her limbs grow heavy. The binding is still mine to control, Vespera hissed. Your mother's life force powers it still, and as long as those chains hold, your precious fire will remain. Sorrel lunged, not with claws, not with teeth, with something deeper, something that had been waiting her entire life to be set free. She grabbed Vespera's wrist, and flame erupted. Not ordinary fire. This was golden, ancient, alive, fire that burned from within Sorrel's very soul, pouring through the cracks in her binding and shattering the chains link by link. Vespera screamed, You cannot. The binding, your mother's magic. My mother gave her life to protect me. Sorrel's voice resonated with power she had never known she possessed. And you corrupted that sacrifice, used it to cage me, control me. The fire blazed brighter, hotter. But I am done being caged. The chains shattered. Power flooded through Sorrel, vast, brilliant, and overwhelming. The fire of her mother's bloodline, finally free. Finally hers. Vesper stumbled backward, her hand blistered where Sorrel had touched her. "You don't know what you've done," she gasped. "The fire will consume you. It will save him." Sorrel stepped forward, flames dancing along her skin like living armor. "And then it will return to deal with you." She turned and walked from the chamber, leaving her stepmother cowering on the floor. Behind her, she heard Vespera's scream of frustrated rage. Ahead, she saw only Blackmore, only Theron, only the man she refused to let die. The ride back to Blackmore was a blur of wind and flame. Sorrel's fire burned beneath her skin, warming her from within even as the night air rushed past. She could feel Theron through some connection she didn't fully understand. Feel his heart slowing, his life fading. "Hold on," she thought desperately. "Hold on for me." She reached the keep at dawn. The guards at the gate stumbled back at the sight of her, wreathed in golden light, her eyes blazing with power that had not walked these lands in generations. "Luna," one of them breathed. "What? Where is he?" "The Alpha's chambers." "But Luna, he—" She was already running. The corridors seemed to blur past her. Servants pressed themselves against the walls, staring at the flaming woman who had once been their reserved, quiet Luna. She burst through the doors of Theron's chambers. He lay exactly as she had left him, frozen, translucent, and barely breathing. The frost had spread to cover nearly his entire body. Only his face remained clear, his features slack and peaceful. Too peaceful. "No." Sorrel crossed to the bed in 3 steps and seized his hand. "No, you don't get to leave. Not now. Not when I've finally—" She poured her fire into him. It hurt. The collision of flame and ice was agonizing, every nerve in her body screaming as her power met his curse. She could feel the ancient magic resisting, fighting to keep its hold on his heart. But Sorrel's fire was older. Older than the curse, older than the betrayal that had spawned it. This was the fire that had burned before winter existed, the fire that had given warmth to the first wolves, and the fire that lived in the blood of mothers who would do anything to protect those they loved. She burned, and burned, and burned. The frost began to melt. Slowly at first, tiny drops of water forming on Theron's skin, sliding down to soak the sheets beneath him. Then faster, the ice retreating from his chest, his arms, and his throat. His heart stuttered. Then beat. Then beat again. Color flooded back into his features. His skin became opaque, solid, and alive. His chest rose with a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes opened. Sorrel. Her name on his lips was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "You're alive." She was crying, she realized, tears streaming down her face, turning to steam where they met her still-burning skin. "You're alive. You're alive. And you're—" He pulled her down to him and kissed her. His lips were warm. For the first time in her memory, for the first time perhaps in generations, the Alpha of Blackmore was warm. "The curse," he breathed against her mouth. "How did you—" "I burned it." She laughed, half hysterical with relief and joy. "I burned it away." "That's impossible. No one has ever—" "I'm the last of the flame-touched." She pulled back to look at him, her fire slowly banking to a gentle glow beneath her skin. "My mother's bloodline. The oracle told me, fire willingly embracing ice. That's what breaks the curse." Theron stared at her with wonder, with love, with something that looked almost like worship. "You saved me," he said quietly. "You crossed territories, faced your demons, and burned through an ancient curse. For me." "Of course I did." Sorrel cupped his face in her hands, hands that still held echoes of flame. "I love you. and I will burn down anything that tries to take you from me." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her with strength that had returned in full. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I have loved you since the moment you took my hand in that hall. And I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of what you've done for me." Sorrel closed her eyes, letting herself sink into his embrace. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. 6 months later, Sorrel stood on the balcony of the Alpha's chambers, watching the sun rise over Blackmore. The keep was different now. Still built of black granite, still veined with silver, but no longer cold. Warmth had seeped into the stone since the curse was broken, and the blue-white torches had been replaced with ordinary flames that cast golden light through the corridors. A pair of arms wrapped around her from behind, careful of the swell of her belly. "You should be resting," Theron murmured against her ear. "The healer said fresh air is good for the baby." "The healer also said you need to stop attending council meetings that run past midnight." Sorrel smiled. "The healer is a busybody." Theron laughed, a sound she still was not used to hearing. Since the curse broke, laughter had come more easily to him. So had warmth, tenderness, joy. He was the same man she had married, still formidable, still commanding, and still capable of reducing enemies to quivering submission with a single look. But he was also more. Freed from the fear of loving, he had bloomed. "Caspian sent word from Thornwood," Theron said quietly. "The trial is concluded." Sorrel's hands tightened on the balcony railing. "And?" "Vesper has been found guilty of murder, conspiracy, and the use of forbidden blood magic. But she will spend the rest of her life imprisoned in the neutral territory." Something loosened in Sorrel's chest. Not satisfaction. She was too tired for satisfaction. But perhaps peace. "And Delphine?" she asked. "Your sister has petitioned to leave Thornwood. She's asked permission to settle in the northern territories, far from everything that happened." Sorrel nodded slowly. She and Delphine had spoken once since everything changed. A brief, awkward conversation in which her half-sister had apologized for believing Vespera's lies. It was not forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. "Let her go," Sorrel said. "She needs to find her own path." "And Stellin?" Sorrel turned to look at her mate. He was watching her with those silver eyes that no longer held winter. Eyes that now burned with quiet warmth. "What about him?" "He's requested an audience. He claims he wants to apologize, to explain." Sorrel considered this for a long moment. Stellin, the man who had rejected her, who had torn their bond apart and chosen her sister. The man whose actions had led her here, to this balcony, to this life she could never have imagined. "Let him come," she said finally, "but I will not see him alone, and I will not offer forgiveness. Some things cannot be forgiven, only survived." Theron pressed a kiss to her temple. "My fierce Luna." "Your flame-touched Luna," she corrected with a smile. "There's a difference." "Indeed there is." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, painting the mist in shades of gold and rose. Below, the pack was stirring. Wolves going about their morning routines, children racing through the courtyards. Life unfolding in all its ordinary, beautiful complexity. This was her home now. Her pack. Her family. "Do you ever regret it?" Theron asked quietly. "Being claimed by a stranger? Being taken from everything you knew?" Sorrel turned in his arms, facing him fully. She raised one hand to his cheek, feeling the warmth that now lived beneath his skin. "You claimed me when no one else would have me," she said. "You saw strength where others saw shame. You gave me a chance when my own pack threw me away." She rose on her toes and kissed him gently. "I was rejected. I was cast aside. I was told I would never be wanted, never be loved, never be anything more than a burden to be discarded." She pulled back, meeting his gaze with eyes that still held embers of ancient flame. But you made me, Luna. You made me loved. You made me realize that being rejected by the wrong person was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it led me to you. Theron's arms tightened around her. We saved each other, he said quietly. Sorrel smiled. We did. Below them, the sun finished rising and a new day began. And in the Alpha's chambers, surrounded by warmth that had once seemed impossible, the cold king and his flame-touched Luna held each other close. No longer hiding, no longer afraid, no longer alone. They had been broken. They had been cursed. They had been told that love would destroy them. But love had not destroyed them. Love had set them free. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. Let me know what you thought. I always read your comments, and they mean more than you know.